Well, good afternoon to those that are logged on, and hopefully we'll gather some more as this presentation goes on. My name is Kelly Busey. I'm the police chief in Gig Harbor for the city, joined by other city staff, Katrina Knutson, the city administrator, Josh Stecker, the city clerk, and Jeff Langhelm, the public works director. We're here to help answer any questions, provide some facts about the proposed levy lid lift that is on the April 23rd ballot. So I'll go through the presentation, and then staff would be available to field any questions as they may arise. The purpose here is, of course, just to put out the information from the city's perspective on what the levy lid lift is on a factual basis, and let you make your own decisions, informed decisions. So we'll start with the most basic. So what is the levy lid lift? And it has to do with your property taxes. Property taxes are levied against your real property. Then that rate is initially based on the assessed value, and under this proposal would be the initial assessed value for 2025. The rate is dollars per thousand as determined by your assessed value of your real property. And that rate is capped at a maximum amount by state law that we call a lid. And we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. So how are property taxes used? They're used for general fund operations, public safety, police, things like that. Most employees are paid out of the general fund. Some infrastructure maintenance is paid for. We maintain our parks through general fund. These are different than what we call our enterprise funds, which are essentially pay for themselves, the sewer, water, and stormwater upgrades that then services that are provided by the city. So who pays city property tax? That's landowners within the city limits. We get the question that if everybody in the Gig Harbor addressing scheme would be subject to this tax. That is not true. It's only if you live in the 6.25 square miles of the city limits of Gig Harbor. Currently, the levy is enacted at a rate of 70 cents per $1,000 of your assessed value. The proposed levy lid lift would raise that to $1.10 for starting in 2025. The state limit would allow a municipality to ask for up to $1.60 per thousand of assessed value. That's not being done in this case. It's a lesser value of $1.10. There's some information in the community that this would be automatically renewed or reset every year. That's not true. You'll see how property tax levy amounts can be degraded over time, and I'll demonstrate that in the next couple of slides as well. What are some other cities around us paying per thousand? That you can see on there, the range of Bremerton, $1.44, down to Sumner at 92 cents, and Gig Harbor's currently it's that 70 cents per thousand rate. We do have information that at least some of the cities on the screen are considering a levy lid lift as well. So where do your property taxes go? And this is a source of some confusion. So out of every dollar of your property tax, the state's going to take a little over 27%. Our fire district, and again, we don't have a fire department in the city. The fire district expands well beyond the city limits. They charge a rate of 26.1% of that dollar. And the local school district is just over 22%. The county is 8.8%, and the city is 8.3%. There's some other taxing entities that make up the 7.1 of other, the library, the flood district, things like that. But it's being said in the community too that the property taxes are going up by 57%. Realize that that's just the city portion. That 8.3% portion of your dollar would increase by 57%. And we'll put that in real dollars here in a few minutes too. So let's compare current tax rates in the city. An assessed value of $756,200. This is a real property that we researched online. In 2024, their property taxes were just over $6,400. The median value of a home in the city is $750,000. So that's why we picked that as our demonstrated property value. A similar county residence, and again, an actual residence we looked up at $754,000, paid this year would pay $7,100, almost $7,200 in property taxes. One of the major differences there is that in the county, they're paying for metro parks, and that's probably the most significant difference there. There are a small number of residents that pay that Penn Met Parks component of their property tax that live in the city, a recently annexed portion of the city. So an initiative that was enacted in the early 2000s restricts the amount of money that the city or county can take cumulatively to 1% growth per year. So from the entire properties subject to property tax within the city limits, we can only increase the amount overall that we collect to 1% per year. And you can see what that looks like over time, the last 10 years. At that same 10-year time, we've increased the assessed value of all of the real properties in Gig Harbor through development or property improvements, basically tripled from 1.6 billion to 4.7 billion. So when we overlay those two numbers together, remember the assessed value expressed in the green line in billions has just about tripled, while the blue line representing property tax has increased just over $1 million. So what happens to our levy rate over time? In 2013, that levy rate was $1.41 per thousand of assessed value. Because the city can only collect 1% additionally each year, the amount that each property, the rate at which each property is assessed continues to go down. So collectively, all the properties paid 1% more each year, but that meant they paid it at a lower rate as the property values increased. So let's take a look at our property tax revenue versus our actual expenditures for the last 10 years. All right, you can see that in the green, the revenue has increased at that 1% rate, but you'll see that the general fund, which is where your property taxes go, has increased fairly substantially. Now, what happened in 20 and 21? Why did we go down in those actual expenditures? Approximately 30% of the employees in the city, we had vacancies of about 30%. We had some employees that left and went other places. That is the biggest expenditure within the general fund. So when we overlay the consumer price index over that same time period, you'll see that it's gone up now just slightly more than the general operating fund budget, 27% over that same time frame. So what are some other major revenue sources for the city? There's a sales tax. We'll talk about how that is broken down in just a minute. And development fees. These are the permit fees and the development fees paid by builders and people that develop their properties. So sales tax first, we have a sales tax rate of 8.9%, not quite the lowest in the county, but close to it. And it's broken down. Of that 8.9% sales tax, the city initially collects 1%. Of that 1%, we've learned that we turn 15% of that 1% over to the county for other services. You'll see that some other things that are listed on here, including like zoo and aquarium, some criminal justice taxes and things like that. And that's how we make up our 8.9% sales tax. Sales tax revenue over that same 10-year period that we've been looking at has gone up about $3.5 million. But in 2022, compared to this year, or to last year, it declined a bit. And we're seeing that trend continue. And I'll look to the city administrator to make sure I'm on point here, but I believe that the last time we looked at our sales tax revenues for 2024, they were down 2.6%. Is that right?
That's correct. We had the data that we have showed a 0.6% increase for us in the November-December timeframe due to the holidays. However, January's numbers did come in again at 2.6% below our projection.
Thank you. Talked about development fees, the fees paid for building permits, inspections, things like that. You can see that while the city expanded greatly over the last, even more than 10 years, the development fees that we brought in peaked in 2018 at almost $3.5 million. Last year, that went way down to $649,000, and there's no forecast that those development fees will increase substantially in the near future. So we look at all revenues brought in by the city. You can see them all piled up together. I'll draw your attention to the black band on the very top of each column. Some of the revenue sources here in 21, 22, 23 were grant related. Some of those were related to COVID. Those are what we call one-time revenues. Again, the city will aggressively pursue grant opportunities in the future, but that's not a guarantee that we'll see that sizable of a component moving forward. So we'll line them all up. Actual expenses, our budgeted expenses have always exceeded our actual expenses. And then contrast that with all revenues. You'll see as we approach 22 and 23, those bars all start to align. As we look towards the future, we forecast a budget deficit of approximately $3 million around the end of 2025. The city's currently not operating in a deficit, as demonstrated here, but that's the forecast, and that's why the levy lid lift is proposed to try to close that budget gap. So what has changed in the last 10 years that we've been looking at? Our population has gone up 65%. We've added a lot more miles of roads, more commercial and industrial square footage. Code enforcement actions have increased a lot. We've added a full-time code enforcement officer to try to manage that. There's all sorts of unfunded federal and state mandates affecting all of our departments within the city. We've added a lot more parks. The police department has seen an increase of calls for service that runs about parallel to the population increase, 64%. And then again, that cost of living has increased 27.5%. So the natural question is, what efficiencies have we implemented to try to address any budget shortfall? One of the very first things we did, the city administrator terminated the contract of the city's federal lobbyist. That was at about $100,000 a year. We didn't see enough benefit from that. There are other priorities that have been deferred. Some of them are eventually going to be mandated, like the Climate Action Plan and the Urban Forestry Management Plan. We've put off plans for developing more of the Cushman Trail, another position within the police department that is needed, and things like a school resource officer that we've heard from the community. We also implemented some process improvements, a lean Kaizen sort of analysis of our planning department that helped us improve some efficiencies there. Most of our departments are going to a paperless workflow that'll speed things up. All of our permits now are electronic in nature, and that will help both the developers or people that are wanting to submit for building permits submit those plans, and it helps our internal review process, makes that more efficient. Currently, there are 9 general fund positions that are frozen. It's about $1.5 million in salary savings. As revenues might turn around, we would take a look at those positions on an individual basis. For instance, if there's not enough need for a new building inspector, if we don't have that kind of workload, that position would not be filled. So those are always being scrutinized and filled as needed. So we've heard some things from the community, but what about the conservation properties, the forested land that's been purchased up near the intersection of Harborview and North Harborview? So those are properties that were under contract or the purchasing process started under previous administrations. Those are not heavily paid for by general fund, and perhaps I can ask the Public Works Director to weigh in and talk about the funding source for both the conservation properties and the sports complex up by the YMCA that does not include any general fund money. So Director Langhill?
Sure, thank you, Chief. Yeah, so looking at the conservation properties first, we have been able to leverage general fund money along with some bonds and some grants to obtain these new properties that we use in conservation and open space. The open space is a priority as identified in the city's comprehensive plan. And so we continue to look at opportunities, but we have obligated all of the areas that we can see in the short term with the purchase of the conservation properties we have, which is a little over 40 acres. And we are able to use the city's general fund for this purchase. But like I said, the numbers that were used for purchasing these properties is about a little over $300,000 in general fund, about $4 million in long-term general obligation bonds, and then a little over $1.1 million in grants. And as Chief Busey alluded, the city was already obligated to move forward with these properties back in 2020 and 2021 when the agreements were first set in place. So the city just followed through with its previous agreements to make those happen. And then related to the sports complex, as Chief Busey noted, no general fund money has been used to construct the improvements that are proposed on the sites. The phase 1B is through a myriad of funding options. This includes over $1 million in grants, a special capital only fund that we refer to as a hospital benefit zone at about $4.6 million, park impact fees at about a little $550,000. And then the water fund put some money into the project to pay for a water main extension that benefited the city's water system at $84,000. And then we have two separate capital development real estate excise tax funds that can only be used for capital construction. Each of those put in $150,000. So that has how we've been able to purchase develop these sports complex sites, specifically phase 1B. The city is not paying any amount of general fund into the future phase 1A project. And the phases 2 and 3 funding sources will be determined in the future by funding availability and council priorities. The city's sports complex is also in the city's comprehensive plan and listed as a priority. So we continue to follow that comprehensive plan to develop the sports complex as funding is allowed. And I will also state related to the sports complex that there is operational considerations related to the sports complex, not just capital construction dollars. And those operational considerations would impact the general fund wherever user fees are not collected. And that only includes the phase 1B site. The other sites within the sports complex, the 1A site, which is the lighted turf fields, that's collecting user fees, and the YMCA will be working with that. And then phases 2 and 3, which is the Little League fields, and 3 is the currently vacant property south of the YMCA. That will also be maintained and operated through user fees. So again, only one portion of this would need general fund monies to pay for the operation.
Okay, thank you, Director Lingham. So the bottom line is, how would this affect the average homeowner here? And again, we're going to use that $750,000 median value residence inside the city limits. In 2024, that taxable amount at $750 is $63.53. In 2025, it would go up $300, $66.53, or $25 per month. We're sensitive to people on fixed incomes. And so we want to make sure that people understand that there are exemptions available for senior and disabled within our community. That's a program run by the Pierce County Assessors Program where they freeze your property value. You pay none of the voter approved taxes that are in addition to just the standard rate. Age 61 and over that would be eligible for that, or if you're disabled at any age, and it has to be for your primary residence only. There's a maximum gross income, the 2023 rate would be $64,000 a year. That's after medical expenses. So you can deduct your medical expenses, and if you make $64,000 or less after that, then you would be eligible for this program as well. So we'll get into the what ifs. What if the levy lid lift is not approved? Well, ultimately, this goes back to the city council for direction and action. Some possibilities would be the implementation of a business and occupation tax on some or all of the businesses in Gig Harbor. There's been talk about trying to exempt certain businesses if that were to be enacted. And then maybe asking the voters to reconsider a levy lid lift at the same or a lower rate. We do have the pending public safety sales tax in August that'll be before the voters. So that'll be factored in too. And if no additional revenue sources can be identified, then it's back to the drawing board. So those are going to be determined by council. I will invite City Administrator Knutson to weigh in here if there's other comments on that particular aspect of the process.
I think you did a great job, Chief.
Okay, covered all that. I would now, I'll stop sharing my screen and maybe we can see if any of our attendees have any questions at all. City Clerk Stecker, it should be obvious how they can raise their hand unless they're on their phone. I'm not sure of the instructions there.
Yeah, anyone who's attending can raise their hand by pushing the raise hand button at the bottom of their screen, or press *9 if you're on your phone, and that will raise your hand for us to see.
So from our attendees, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll just open the floor to City Administrator Knutson to see if there's any final comments or anything else you would like to add before we sign off.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. We really appreciate your time. This was our one during the day. There's also one next Wednesday. I believe it's at 6 p.m. Kelly, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, next Wednesday, for the folks who work. So there's another opportunity to ask your questions if you didn't think of any today. But we value your time and your input in this process. And if there are any questions, anybody on the city's executive team, mayor, council would be happy to answer your questions. And most of all, would just encourage you to vote on April 23rd.
Okay, thank you all for attending. We can stop the recording now, Josh.